Chris Valasek, have spent a couple of years now looking into automotive cybersecurity and looking at some of the areas where potentially a remote attacker could compromise a vehicle and get it to do things that it shouldn't be able to do remotely, like turn off the transmission, shut off the brakes. And they were able to demonstrate this over the summer on an untampered with vehicle, fresh off of the factory floor room, basically, through the wireless network, the 3G, 4G connection that was in the car. They were able to rewrite the firmware in the infotainment system to be able to then send spurious messages across the car network, to be able to cause it to do things like turn the wheel at low speeds, to disable the brakes, to be able to cut the transmission off. And they demonstrated this on a highway. So that got a lot of press, obviously. I don't want to dwell too much on what the hype looked like, but pretty quickly it was clear that Chris and Charlie, the researchers who discovered this, were no longer in control of the storyline. That the good work that they did got subsumed by the hype surrounding it, by the confusion that existed in the media, in people's minds. You know, all of my friends who knew I am in the security industry asking me, you know, should I panic? Should I buy an old car? I had a lot of people say after this event, you know, I just drive a mid-90s car. I'm going to start buying older cars now because I'll feel safer. In reality, they're not safer because modern cars are way safer than some of the older ones. So the story kind of got out of control, and it took over what the story should have been, which is the good research and the knowledge that automakers are doing more. They just need to do it faster. Instead, it became about the hype around it, and particularly a lot of critics focused on one aspect, which was the live demonstration on a highway where they remotely cut the brakes. A lot of people called them reckless and putting people's lives in danger. And the story became more about that than the research. So just to really quickly run through kind of an analysis and a recap, there was some really solid technical work here. They were able to get remote control of the vehicle and override its firmware live over the air. That's not easy to do. That took a lot of work, that took a lot of effort, and it was really good work that was done. They also debunked the myth that there's no remote attack surface on vehicles over the air, which is clearly not the case. What they did triggered a software update to fix a several years old bug in some of the software. Then there was a subsequent recall that increased the adoption rate of that software fix. There was a carrier block that reduced exposure across the entire deployed fleet, which is again a good thing. But you started to like I said, see some of the negative blowback from particularly some of the media reports. There were a number of media outlets that called what they did reckless, said that they're endangering lives. There were a number of public policymakers and legal experts who called for them to be arrested or at least investigated for some of this. The large amount of negative publicity for the automakers also got in the way of some of the efforts that they were already taking to reach out to security researchers. There were a couple of public vulnerability disclosure programs that were basically stifled after the media hit and after the hype came out. So it got in the way of protecting people, and it was antithetical to what they were trying to do, which is to get more safety in cars. And it deployed what we call antibodies to some of the security research that was going to be done and that has been done since then among policymakers, legislators, the legal community, some of the media outlets, certainly some of the automotive companies. It's a lot harder to talk to them now because of the negative publicity. And one of the interesting things that I've learned from working with some of the legislators in the US is they're very, very concerned about any crisis of confidence in the buying public that could affect GDP. So if people stop buying cars because they're afraid that they might get hacked, that has a material effect on the global economy. In the US, it's something like 20% of the global economy is in the auto segment. So that really is concerning to policymakers, it's concerning to economists, it's concerning to everybody. Now I want to contrast that with a different story that you might not have heard about. This is the story of a researcher named Billy Rios, who he's spent years looking into medical devices. One that he was particularly interested in, he did some investigation in around the same time frame, published some information a little bit earlier to the federal government of the US and to the manufacturer. And ultimately ended up with a very, very similar result. That is, there was a kind of a recall issued for those devices to be removed from service, so to kind of fix the flaw.